Rest is resistance. Can I get an amen? And that's the title. Reverend Emilie Boggis. Now, every day after school, the son of a well-known rabbi would enter his house, place his backpack on the dining room table, leave the house through the back door, and head into the woods behind the house. At first, the rabbi gave little thought to his son's ritual until it continues for days and then for weeks. Every day, out into the woods for almost half an hour. The rabbi grew concerned. "My son," he asked one day, "I noticed that every day you leave our home to spend time in the woods. Are you okay?" "Oh, Papa," the son replied, "there's no need to worry. I go into the woods to pray. It is in the woods that I can talk to God." "Oh," the rabbi said, clearly relieved, "but you should know that God is the same everywhere." "Yes, Papa," said the boy, "I know that God is the same everywhere, but I am not." Can I get an amen? Amen. Do you know what amen means? The word itself has been traced back to an ancient Egyptian word, ament, and translates to ground of being. When we respond with an amen to something we've heard, it expresses that what we heard is connected to a truth or an experience that we have known, like the earth supporting us. You always have a choice to say amen or not. Throughout this morning's service, I will ask you today, can I get an amen? If what I've said resonates, if it connects with you, by all means, say amen. If not, that's okay too. It would be a very boring world if we all agreed with everything everyone said. Now, returning to our story of the rabbi and his son. The son teaches his father a lesson. God may be the same everywhere, but we are not. There is such a thing as sacred space and sacred time, and when we enter, it opens us up to the divinity within and the divinity without. It helps us find our center. It may be available to us in all places, in all spaces, in all times, but some spaces don't work for us because we are not the same everywhere. I wonder, how many of us live our lives, our days like the boy, entering our homes, putting our work down, and going to our sacred spaces? How many of us, after a long day, release our burdens and take the time to find our center, our sense of what is holy? Not too many hands, I see. We enter our homes, and there's a never-ending amount of work to do. Someone recently shared with me, almost in a whisper, "I miss the slowness of time in that first year of the pandemic." Is it wrong? It feels like we're back to breakneck speed. I've said it once, and I'll say again, the wisdom from Peter Drucker, the famous management consultant. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Even with the best intentions to live a slower pace of life, America's dominant culture takes pride in its fast-paced urgency. The culture ate our intention for breakfast. My grandmother has a framed cross-stitch on her wall that reads, "To rest is to rust." We can sleep when we're dead. Welcome to grind culture, says Tricia Hershey, a performance artist and activist, a theologian and daydreamer. She calls herself the nap bishop. And her ministry, You guessed it, is called the nap ministry. Let me warn you, it's not just about naps. It's not about self-care. Podcaster Glennon Doyle's Riley commented that calling Tricia Hersey's ministry a nap ministry is like calling Jesus' work a walking ministry. When people enter Tricia's nap retreats, they are often surprised. They think they are coming to nap so they can return to grind culture well rested. What people aren't expecting, Tricia says, is she is calling you to resist grind culture. Full stop. She not only hands you a blanket, she hands you a metaphorical flamethrower so that you can burn grind culture to the ground. In fact, rest is, in fact, resistance. And she's calling all of us to join together and resist. The times are urgent, says Bayo Akamolafe. Let us slow down. Imagine a world where naps are essential to human flourishing. Can I get an amen? Amen. The nap bishop says rest is a form of resistance because it disrupts and pushes back against capitalism and white supremacy. Both of these toxic systems refuse to see the inherent divinity of human beings, not to mention the planet, and have used human bodies, especially black and brown bodies, as a tool for production, evil, and violence for centuries. Grind culture has made us, all of us, human machines, willing and ready to donate our lives to a capitalist system that thrives by placing profit over people, profit over the planet. Have any of you heard the news about cargo ships streaming right through whale habitats and feeding grounds and major pathways? Whales like the endangered blue whales living off the southern tip of Sri Lanka, they strike and kill the whales repeatedly. An organization called Whale Safe has been asking large cargo ships to slow down to 10 knots when traveling through whale territory since 2014. Whale Safe uses buoys that listen for and identifies the songs of blue whales, fin whales, and humpbacks, which alerts shipping vessels who are near the whales, urging them to slow down or reroute. In 2019, before the system's launch in Santa Barbara, California, 46% of vessels slowed down in voluntary speed reduction zones. With the new system, the percentage has risen to 60% in 2022. And there's another organization called Protecting Blue Whales and Blue Skies, actually pays shipping companies to slow down for whales. The times are urgent. Let us slow down. Imagine a world where we are paid to slow down. Can I get an amen? Amen. The Rest is Resistance movement, says the NAP bishop, is a connection and a path back to our true nature. We are stripped down to who we really were before the terror of capitalism and white supremacy. That's when we learn that we are enough. That's when we claim our divinity. God might be everywhere, but it's nearly impossible to find our center in the grind culture. The rabbi's son goes into the woods to find his center because the dominant culture stops him from experiencing divinity everywhere. Yes, his trip to the woods is an act of centering. It's also one of resistance, says Tricia Hersey. There's a Twilight Zone episode called The Obsolete Man. It's set in the future, not the one that will be, but one that could be, the host Rod Serling tells us. We enter a scene where a man is put on trial for being obsolete, no longer productive, no longer worthy. You see, in the future, the state has banned books, and the man is a librarian. Therefore, the man is now obsolete. If found guilty of being obsolete, the librarian will be put to death because he has no value. In his youth, he had been a carpenter. Producing furniture is valuable for the state. If he had remained a carpenter, he would not be obsolete. But the librarian chooses to resist. His method of resistance? Reading. At the end of the show, the host Rod Serling does something unexpected. He reappears on the show to give the moral, saying, any state, any entity, any ideology which fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete. Now you might recognize those words. They are our first principle. We Unitarian Universalists affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of each human being. Rod Serling was a member of the Santa Monica congregation. And he wrote this episode in 1961, the same year that Unitarian Universalists voted to create and live by our principles. Tricia Hersey tells us to view grind culture through a similar lens. This dominant culture, grounded in capitalism and white supremacy, does not recognize the worth and dignity of neither human beings nor our planet. Any state, any corporation, any religion, any entity, warns Rod Serling, that fails to recognize the worth and dignity of life is headed toward a future in which it is obsolete. The times are urgent. Let us slow down. Imagine a world where you are worthy just for being alive. You are valued. Can I have an amen? How many of us are exhausted? How many of us are facing an even more exhausting week? How ironic that we have lived with a deadly virus for 3 years that attempted to teach us to take exhaustion seriously. We didn't listen because culture eats strategy for breakfast. How many of you have teenagers at home? Not many of us. Right? How many of you had a teenager at home sometime in your life? Does this sound familiar? A teenager with a virus. Just your common winter virus, getting ready for school. He or she finally shares symptoms. Sore throat, aches and fatigue, no fever. Today, you test for COVID, and it's negative. You try, you say, I think you should stay home. The response, I can't. I've got too much work to do. You counter, if you had COVID, you'd be home for 5 days, period. Let me ask you, if you didn't have a lot of work to do, would you stay home? A confession. Yes, gladly. I feel awful. Well, guess who ended up staying home and sleeping for 6 straight hours? And so now you text from work. I guess it's good that you didn't go to school. The reply, yeah, tell that to my math homework. We aren't allowed to be sick because the work never stops. The pace is unrelenting. If we don't do the work, we can't catch up. And then it requires someone else, our coworkers, our partners, to add more work to workloads that are unsustainable. Grind culture, says the Nat Bishop, keeps us exhausted, and we're addicted to it. If I told all of you that your practice for the week is to get 8 hours minimum sleep per night, as I have done with folks, you wouldn't believe the resistance I hear. I just couldn't, they cry. I couldn't get it all done. That's the point. Keeping us exhausted is intentional. Because if we're exhausted, we don't have the ability to dream of new possibilities for ourselves, for our planet. It keeps us in a state of despair. One of the tenets of Hershey's nap ministry is that naps are portals to our imagination. The seeds of our future exist in our imagination. When we nap, we are connected to our dream space. Grind culture steals us from that space of dreams and imaginations and futures. But just remember, oppression was imagined. Liberation can be imagined too. It will require us to take our imaginations back. It will require us to slow down. It will require us to rest. Let's begin right now. Sit back in your chair, your back upright, your feet firmly planted, or recline if you're at home in a chair, on a bed, on a couch, in a hammock. Don't you wish we could do that here? Okay, scan your body and recognize any tension. Breathe deep. Imagine a world without limits. Imagine a world without oppression. Imagine a world of liberation. Imagine a world where whales swim free without risk of harm. Inhale deeply from your own belly. Hold for 4 seconds. Exhale slowly. Open your eyes. Repeat this several times a day. Lady Nancy Ambrose was the grandmother of the prophetic mystic Howard Thurman. She was born a slave. As a little girl, the white preacher would come to the plantation and offer a service for her community. He was allowed to do this. Years later, she told her grandson about a moment that changed her life forever. The preacher looked her and her community in the eye and said, "If you remember one thing and one thing only, I want you to remember this. You are not slaves. You are children of God." For the rest of her life, Lady Nancy Ambrose held this truth inside of her. It was her center. No one else could take that away from her. Her grandson went on to meet Mahatma Gandhi, the guru of nonviolent resistance. Gandhi taught Thurman to resist small acts of evil, to not begin with the big evil in the world, to start small, to resist small acts of evil and work your way up to the bigger ones. And Howard Thurman returned home to the United States, and his small act of resistance was to teach folks, and I'm going to just interrupt here for a moment. She is spelling folks, F-O-L-X, okay, which is a plural noun that is used to explicitly signal the inclusion of groups that are commonly marginalized. So Howard Thurman returned home to the United States, and his small act of resistance was to teach folks, F-O-L-X, especially Americans with their backs against the wall, the marginalized, people of color, the poor. To teach folks how to establish a sense of inherent worth and live from a place of dignity. Thurman was following the footsteps of his grandmother. If the dignity of a person can be restored, if a person can claim their worth, he said, it stabilizes the ego, it increases self-esteem, and it gives one the courage to question oppression. How did he teach folks to do this? Taught them how to sit in silence, not unlike a nap. It seems like such a small act, and it is. But the writer Maggie Smith reminds us to remember geologic time, how the slightest shifts, imperceptible daily, carve canyons and make mountains. We have to trust that our small acts of resistance are making progress, even if we can't see it yet. Times are urgent. Let us slow down. Imagine living from your center every day. Imagine claiming your worth every day. Imagine your dignity restored. Can I get an amen? Amen. Because if we can do that, no one can take that from us. Rest is resistance. I've decided to follow my grandmother's footsteps. I'm learning how to cross stitch. It's a gift for my future grandchildren. One day I will frame it and give it to them. It will say, to rest is to resist. Amen. Amen. This is the ground of our being.